Hey friends, welcome back to Coffee with Jesus. I'm coming to you today from a little weekend getaway, just stepping away from the routine of being a busy property manager, taking a breather and enjoying life. It's so good to take a break away, isn't it? Just to reset and refocus. This morning, I sat down with my coffee and read Jeremiah 29, and I knew I had to record a podcast about it. If you haven't read this chapter recently, I encourage you to do so. If you don't have a Bible handy, go ahead and get the app. It's free, and it only takes about 5 minutes to read the whole chapter. I love talking about what hits home for me, and this chapter does. Because for the last 4 years, I've been living in my own kind of exile, which is what Jeremiah 29 is all about. Waiting, praying, and trusting that God is going to bring me out of my season. And let me tell you, God has used this time to mold me, to shape me into a person He wants me to be. But that doesn't mean it's easy. Waiting is hard. Spiritual attacks come. The enemy loves to whisper lies when we're in a season of waiting, telling us God isn't moving, that nothing is changing, that we are stuck. And this predicament is where I found myself this morning. But here's the thing. When the enemy comes at you, the best way to fight back, the best way, I like to say, is to punch him in the face. And what I mean by that is just get down on your knees and pray to the Father in heaven. Because when we get on our knees, surrender everything, and commit ourselves to Him, God meets us right there. I love the Lord. I love how He encourages me, and I love that He does the same for anyone who seeks Him. My prayer is that today's episode speaks to you, encourages you, and reminds you that even in exile, God has a plan. Let's dive in. Let's take it back to Jeremiah 29. This chapter was written to the Israelites who had been taken from their homeland in Jerusalem and forced to live in Babylon. There, they were exiles, not where they wanted to be, far from anything familiar and wondering if they'd ever get back to the life they had before. And isn't that how we feel sometimes? Stuck in a season we didn't ask for, waiting for things to change and wondering if God even sees us where we're at. Maybe for you, it's a waiting season in your career or your relationships or even the dreams that you have. Maybe life just doesn't look the way you thought it would, and you're asking, God, how much longer am I going to be here? The Israelites were asking the same thing, and God answered them in Jeremiah 29. He said, You're going to be here for a while, 70 years to be exact. That's not the quick rescue they were hoping for. But here's where it gets really interesting. God didn't just leave them in their waiting to try to figure things out. He gave them specific instructions how to live while they waited. And so let's go over what He told them to do. He said in Jeremiah 29, 5 through 6, build houses, plant gardens, get married, and have kids. In other words, don't put your life on hold just because you're in a waiting season. If you're in a job you don't love, keep showing up and doing your best. If your prayers feel unanswered, keep walking in faith. And if you're waiting for God to move, don't stop living while you wait. And here's another thing He said. He said, seek the peace of where you're at. God told them to seek the peace and prosperity of the city where He had sent them. And that's in Jeremiah 29:7. That means even when we don't like where we are, we can still be a blessing. Pray for the people around you. Find ways to serve, to love, to encourage, even in the hard seasons. And in Jeremiah 29, 8 through 10, He warns about false hope. The Israelites had false prophets telling them that they'd be out of exile any day. But God said, no, you're here for 70 years. Sometimes we want shortcuts, but God's best work happens in the waiting. Don't rush the process. Don't settle for something just because you're tired of waiting. God's timing is better than anything that we could force on our own. And in Jeremiah 29:11, it's a verse that most of us know and we love. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. So if you're in a tough season right now, this is for you. Your exile is not the end of your story. God still has a plan, and it's a good plan. And then finally, in Jeremiah 29, verses 12 through 13, God says, "You will seek me and find me whenever you seek me with all your heart." If we're honest, sometimes exile makes us seek everything but God. We look for distractions, quick fixes, and anything to escape the waiting. But what if instead of running from God, we run to Him? If you're in a waiting season or an exile season right now, whether it's waiting for a relationship to move forward, praying for a door to open, or just feeling stuck in life, here's what I want you to take away from this. Keep praying even when you don't see the answer yet. Keep living even when the season feels so long. Keep trusting because God is working behind the scenes. And just like He did for the Israelites, God will bring you out when the time is right. My final thoughts are this. I don't know what your exile looks like today, but I do know this. God is not finished with your story. Keep holding on. Keep walking in faith because one day you'll look back and you'll see that even in the waiting, even in your exile, God was there all along. If this encouraged you today, share it with someone who needs a little hope in their season of waiting. And as always, keep seeking, keep trusting, and keep your coffee hot. See you next time.